the Triumphant Birth podcast. My name is Jamie Reichschlager, and thank you for being here. Today is a continuation of the conversation that we had last week. So last week's episode was with Marie Rian on her origin story as a home birth midwife. And then she also shared her own birth story, the birth of Hazel. Marie is such a wise woman and a seasoned midwife. She's practiced all over the country and came back to Wisconsin to start up her own practice. So if you want more of that story, in addition to a good birth story, go back to last week and listen to that one. And for today's conversation, we dive more deeply into the use of homeopathy, what it is, how it works in the body, how it's different from pharmaceutical medication and herbal medicine, and those sorts of things. So once again, this podcast in general is not medical advice and should not be taken as medical advice. You all know this, but again, there it is. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation with my midwife. So Anne-Marie also attended the birth of my first child, if I had not mentioned that. And she's just truly a wealth of knowledge. My babies are crying. I'm going to end this introduction. Enjoy the conversation.
Or you're going down to even like people doing things like wearing sachets of herbs. That's a little bit, that's less of the material dose of the herb and more of the energy of the plant, right? But mostly herbs are used also in a very material way. This is used, it impacts this system, it stops bleeding in this way. This is a nervine, it's going to work on your nervous system, it's going to work on calming. This is something that's going to work on your cardiac system, it's going to slow your heart rate, all of those sorts of things, but they're very specific, direct actions, and they are changing your body. Mm-hmm. The next step down past that, like wearing of plants, is more energetic medicine. So things like flower essences fall in there, right? And so flower essences are medicines that are made from flowers from different plants that have been steeped in water, in sunlight for 8 hours and then diluted and succussed and diluted with water and brandy. So there's no plant material in there unless there's like some pollen or things like that, but everything is strained out, right? And those are oftentimes used for emotional support. They very rarely have a big physical impact, and they're really also pretty user-friendly, right? Like people can pick them up and set them down and experiment with them without it having suppressive impacts on the body, right? Homeopathy is kind of the one of the further out aspects of energetic medicine, kind of like if you're familiar with acupuncture and how that's used to redirect chi in the body, right? So the idea with homeopathy is that you take a medicinal substance and you dilute it and potentize it until there is actually no material left. And instead of having that direct material impact that you would have from the substance itself, you have a resonance that impacts the body's vital force. And your vital force is like your energetic spirit, if you want to call it that. I mean, like there are lots of ways to think of it.
And for anyone who is thinking like, wow, this is kind of out there, this is kind of like woo, like the frequencies are very, very real things. They're measurable in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I just saw a thing that was like, oh, bees can actually hear the frequencies of flowers.
Yes.
And when there's another bee in that flower, because of the ions or whatever, it cancels each other out.
Exactly.
And then the bees can fly past and find one that's open for them to go and pollinate. So this is not like made up stuff. This is like very real in nature. These things are measurable.
And there are some folks who have looked at the impacts of like the nanocellular impacts of homeopathic medicine and been able to document it in a way that's more scientifically aligned with the way that we do things in the scientific community.
Yes.
Right? All of this is scientific at its base if you want to think about the broad idea of what science is, right?
Absolutely.
The way that homeopathy works is that we try to find in either an acute moment, right? An acute moment is something that's got a distinct beginning, distinct end, and doesn't happen over and over in your life. So a headache might be an acute moment, but if you get headaches every 3 days, that's not. That's like part of your body. That's part of how your body expresses its being in the world. Try to find a remedy that has symptoms. From somebody who's healthy who takes that remedy, they'll express specific symptom pictures. So we try and match those symptoms to the symptoms that the person is having. Because within homeopathy, it like treats like. So it's what something causes is also what it cures. As opposed to allopathy, right? So Western medicine is allopathic. Herbalism is allopathic. You're taking something... It's the opposite of, it's opposites treat opposite.
Yes. No, I understand what you're saying. And I'm having flashbacks to like, it can be high school science, it can be college chemistry, whatever, that like dissolves like. That's just a chemical property. And so that's what homeopathy acts on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to think of it. And the goal of homeopathy is not to be suppressive. The goal is to allow your body to heal itself. The goal is to allow your body to begin to move in what's called unbounded sway. It's one of the most beautiful phrases, but it's this idea that we walk through life, and as we have things come into us and at us and through us, whether it is a literal disease or something that's more energetic, our bodies respond. And when our bodies respond, it's our bodies trying to come back into center. We are trying to come back into being and into wholeness. And so when we get a headache, it's because our bodies are like trying to throw off whatever it was that is causing the headache. That doesn't mean that you are causing your own illness, right? It means that in order to heal and to truly heal, we're not just going to take things and push them deeper into our system. We're going to help our bodies begin to find strength again and flexibility and all of these pieces. And the reality is, I've seen this shit work. I mean, I have seen miraculous, amazing things happen using homeopathy where nothing else was working.
Yeah.
And so that's the piece that I always come back to. Because even I sometimes am like, what? This stuff is just so odd, so bizarre and wild. And what am I doing? I mean, I think that about a lot of things in life. I think that about midwifery. Every once in a while, I'll think about birth and be like, how is it that I do this? And how do I forget that this isn't normal? Like,
right.
I forget that other people don't go to births and see this happening, and I forget all of that sort of stuff. So, but yeah, then I remember that I've seen some pretty amazing things happen, pretty transformative things happen for people in acute moments and in the long term. And it's so gentle.
What are the top couple things that come to mind for you?
One that'll always come to mind is somebody who we were about an hour away from, 45 minutes to an hour away from a hospital. She had her first baby. It was a beautiful birth. The baby came out and she started bleeding, and it was like out of nowhere, and it was like a faucet. She was standing, so it was literally like a faucet. And I asked my assistant to give her a remedy. She put it in her mouth, and it sucked back up into her body.
What?
I mean, it was wild. And I wasn't the only person who had that experience of being like, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah.
Everybody who was there was like, okay, that was amazing. I've used it with, some really simple things. Like I've had some babies who've had a little bit of transitional congestion in their lungs, and there are a couple remedies that are extremely useful for helping babies clear that fluid out of their lungs and have a baby that will go from like, okay, do we need to think about taking this baby in for observation or assessment to we've got a baby who's nursing, who's got OSATs at 95%, who's no longer having any respiratory issues at all in a 15-minute time period.
Wow.
Right? We had a challenging shoulder dystocia this spring, probably one of the hardest that I've ever dealt with. And immediately after the birth, I had given the mom some arnica, and I said, go ahead and spit some on his head, because this is something that I do. Uh-huh. And I will say that I had to manipulate this baby quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And typically in a situation like that, you're going to see a lot of bruising. You're going to have a baby who has got tenderness, who's feeling pain. Nothing, zero bruising. Also, she didn't bleed at all.
Wow.
Like totally normal, beautiful birth of the placenta. Like it was like there's the only thing that's different from this and other experiences that I've had was the use of remedies. Mm-hmm. I used arnica and aconite.
Wow. Mm-hmm. It's such an incredible tool.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking for like fingerprints on this baby's shoulders and nothing. And he was pudgy. Wow. Like he would have had
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know what my backups are. I know what my comfort is. And I have enough success experience with this to have a good idea of what works, what doesn't, when to use it, when to skip it, and what to try next. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't feel like an all or nothing proposition for me. This isn't like, oh, if I'm gonna just keep doing the same thing over and over if it's not working. That's obviously not the case.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing about you that I love is that you have all these beautiful tools that you're knowledgeable about. And so you have this like ladder of options that you'll kind of go up the ladder starting with the most subtle. Okay, if it's a subtle shift that's needed, but powerful.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Powerful. And if that's what's needed, it's sort of like the least amount of intervention, which is the true sense of midwifery. It's like the least amount of intervention for the best outcome. But if that, then to your point, we're not doing these insane things where we're doing it over and over and over. And it's okay if we have to go straight to the Pitocin, then go straight to the Pitocin. And for people who I remember, questioning midwifery and questioning like, what does this look like? People who don't know what home birth midwives do or can do. It's like, no, you stand on your own as a very, very skilled provider. And so if there are medical things that need to happen, there are medical things that you will do.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't want to skip over the fact that your consent process is the most fabulous consent process. And that is another reason why I love you so much. It's because for me personally, with my history, I needed that. And so the space that you hold there is absolutely fantastic. And that provides a relationship that where it's super trusting. And so I knew that if you said, I really think that your body needs Pitocin, or I really think that, this is the next step, it's like an immediate yes, because I trust you so much. And I know that if there is, it's not a lesser thing, but if there's something that is more down, more subtle, so like more on the frequency level, and you think that would help, or if we've already tried that and it's not doing the thing, then then we're going to go up that ladder. And you are an expert in normal, and therefore an expert in knowing when something is not normal.
Yes.
And you navigate that so beautifully.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think people come with some pretty specific, sometimes wants, but sometimes needs. Like I think of a person that I worked with who had a really, really, really significant phobia around needles and injections. And so for that person, Pitocin really needed to be absolutely the
Yeah.
last possible effort. And we did go through a couple different remedies with that person before figuring out what the right one was. And it was challenging. And it was like, all right, if we don't figure this out in the next 5 minutes, we're going to do something different. And then finding the right remedy, it was like, it was immediate. It was an immediate shift. And it's not, people always say things like, oh, well, it's just the timing of it. You just waited long enough, or the body took care of itself. And yeah, the body did take care of itself, but not by itself.
Right. It's supportive.
It's supportive.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back in this moment, I'm like, yes, we need to move on probably to something else. But I'm thinking about the fact that my first he was asynclitic.
Mm-hmm.
And you did such a beautiful job with, I did consent to a check. And I tell people this a lot of like, you knew not to give me a number.
Mm-hmm.
You knew to say, yep, you're nice and open. I'm like, okay.
Tell me the number. Don't tell me the number.
Like,
I don't know.
No, I was
right?
so glad. I'm like, all right, I can work with that. And we also used a remedy to help resolve that.
Yep.
And I think it was pulsatilla.
I think it might have been.
Yeah. Yeah. And it resolved things. He shot out like a rocket. So, anyway, just so that listeners know, like I've had actual personal experience with this, and because of that have gone on to use it and do consultations for myself, for my kids. And it's something that is really useful.
It is. And it is really tricky because, like Helios has a great pregnancy and birth kit. And it's like 18 remedies. I mean, it gives you a lot of choices, and the rubrics, which is kind of, or the indications for using remedies are very specific.
Yeah.
But it's also so limited because it's really looking at it in that more allopathic mode of I'm going to use this for this. This is going to stop this from happening.
Sure.
Right? And that tends to be our attitude in allopathic medicine is I'm going to take something because I want this to stop.
Right.
Or I want this to start. And it's a desire for some immediate change and sustained change. And homeopathy can give really immediate change, especially when you are looking at like acute situations. And it can give really sustained change, but it's the process of going through care, as you know, is really, really different. The process of healing is really different, and it's a more complete and profound process.
Right. So just as an example, like I sought out homeopathic support, well, for myself in the twin pregnancy, but also I'm thinking about my son who he was having a really hard time in school. And I'm just going to throw it out there. Like we just pulled him from school. He's 5. We just pulled him to start homeschooling. And that was a major shift. He was having a lot of issues. And so I can definitely see where it's more of that shifting the state of being.
That's exactly it.
Instead of like pinpointing an exact something that's happening.
Yeah. That's the idea is you're trying to get a sense of the whole person. You're getting a sense of the whole state of being. And then there's this reality that there are aspects of our lives that are going to impact us outside of the medicines that we take, no matter what those medicines are. For you guys, with your son, it was the school. That's a huge impact. That is a daily or almost daily experience that was having a profound impact on your family and on his health and well-being.
Yes.
And to be able to step back and see that was part of the cause, right? Or that was part of the issue, came after starting the process of working with homeopathy and being like, it gives clarity on some level.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So kind of keeping with the frequency theme, I don't want to end our conversation before we talk about the power of words.
Yes.
So we had been talking about how important that is. And this topic has been on my list to really dive into because it is so important. Like So, I mean, biblically, life and death is in the power of the tongue. And it can be said over, in many different ways. I'm trying to think of where our conversation was
where
before
it
we hit
started,
record.
Right? So I was thinking about how, for me, language in how we relate to each other always, but also especially during pregnancy, during labor and birth, in the postpartum, how we talk to people who are pregnant and postpartum about what's happening, how they talk about their own experiences, the language that's used around, your baby did this to you, or your body failed in some way, shape, or form, or whatever it is. There is such a, what we were talking about was the root of power and power imbalance and power structure.
Yes.
And how even when we talk about having a positive birth experience, it's an empowered birth experience. And what I've been thinking about is really thinking about pregnancy and birth is one of the times in a person's life where they can have extremely accelerated growth and change. And it's really one of the only times in our lives where accelerated growth and change is considered normal, aside from birth until age 3. But in our adult lives, any other part of our life where we had this much mental, emotional, and physical change happening, something would be in a disease process, right? Which is probably also why people oftentimes think of pregnancy as a disease state, which you and I both know it's not. But what we're looking at in pregnancy is the transformation of two people, right? Nobody is the same person that they were when they started that journey and that process. And if we can start thinking about especially labor and birth, because that tends to be where people's focus is, but looking at it as not a power struggle. It's not a power struggle between you and your body. It's not a power struggle between you and your baby. It's not a power struggle between you and your provider. You don't have to take responsibility for the things that happen during your labor and your birth process, during your pregnancy. This isn't because you did something wrong or because you did something right. It's because you're in the process of becoming. And there's another person, or two people in some cases, or three in some cases, who are also in the process of becoming. And if we could look at this in this much more celebratory and much more communal way of being, instead of it being something where there has to be an authority, I just feel like that would make all the difference in the world. And if, as providers, we could start looking at what we're saying to people and making damn sure that you're not saying something to somebody that's going to make them resent their child or blame themselves or feel like I can't carry a pregnancy, right? That there is something wrong with me fundamentally. There's something broken, or there's something about this baby that was born through me and something about them that broke me. And breaking comes up a lot, like that idea comes up a lot for people. Something's not right, something changed. A lot of the time things do change in the process of labor and birth. A lot of the time things do change physiologically in the process of pregnancy and postpartum. And it doesn't have to be anybody's fault. And it doesn't have to be about a power struggle or situation. It can be something where we really can step back and support people in what they're going through without anybody having to feel like they have to take responsibility for it. I'm not advocating for people not taking responsibility for things and just being like, oh, well, it just happens, right? And there are obviously times when all of us make mistakes, and those mistakes can have big impacts, but we, on some level, have to start to learn to let go of that. Yeah.
It's so, so powerful. The word curses that are put on people
Absolutely
is wild.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, I have not heard this at a home birth, and these are just examples, and I'm not demonizing the individuals
Yep.
in these situations, but it's like how our society is programmed, where even down to like the baby is literally coming out of the vagina. And I've heard OBs be like, or nurses especially, this little stinker, didn't want to, I'm like, you're pitting the baby and the mom against each other.
Exactly.
Stop it.
Yes. Yeah. Or your baby tore you up.
Right.
I mean, and I do hear that in all circumstances. Your baby did not tear you up. Your baby was born. Your body released some tissues.
Your body allowed your baby to be
Your
born.
body allowed your baby to be born, and now we need to do the work to help prepare your body. And that's real serious work.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how to heal your pelvic floor.
Yes.
Let's not talk about why you should be afraid of your child or resentful of them or characterizing them in some way that is diminishing both of you.
Right. Right. As you were talking in the beginning of that, I was thinking about how another way to say that, the process of accelerated growth and becoming in pregnancy and birth and early postpartum especially, is this idea that whatever state you're currently in and whatever inputs are currently there, like that is what you carry into pregnancy and birth. And so it's this magnification of what's already there. So you get more clarity and you get more opportunity to look at these things. And that is why a lot of times people are just so uncomfortable with it, and we go to numbing, and we don't talk about it, and we get the epidural, and we do all these things, and there are multiple reasons to get epidurals. But a lot of people, I feel like, get the epidural because it's a lot to deal with, and it's so complex. It's not just about pure physical pain. It's not. It's pain on all levels, or just the discomfort of actually looking at things. And it starts before the birth, of course.
And we walk into each day of our lives with the history that we carry, right?
Yes.
And a lot of people carry a lot of trauma in their bodies from the experiences that they've had, whether it has been a question of like sexual assault or emotional manipulation or medical assault or any of these things. I don't know very many people in my life who can say they have gone through life without receiving or committing some sort of boundary violation. You know, I think I talk to more people who receive them than
really
commit them. And it's part of our current human experience. But we don't talk about these things.
Right.
And where does it go when you don't talk about it? You know, the body does not lie.
Right.
We embody the experiences that we had. And so if you are walking into a pregnancy and you have things that are coming up, find some way to start doing the work. Well, you have this, it is a golden opportunity, and it is terrifying, right? For a lot of people, it's very scary.
Yes.
It's got to happen at some point.
It does. It's going to come out at some point.
It's going to come out at some point in some way, shape, or form.
And doing the work in pregnancy is so valuable, because then, like, if you can do the bulk of the work, and it's not never fully done.
No.
But if you can do the bulk of the work in pregnancy, then that's a lesson that has the opportunity to come up in the birth.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
And that's what I love.
Yeah.
Like being alongside of people for.
Yeah.
And it's actually the punchline of the podcast and of my platform. It sounds weird to say triumphant birth, but it's actually holding the entire experience in one.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I do have people who have longer labors, but I also have a lot of people who have very straightforward and efficient labors and births. And we spend most of our time prenatally doing the work, right? I would say that's the biggest difference I can say in the shift that I've seen in my practice over the years.
Yeah.
Is we go there. We talk about everything. We figure things out ahead of time so that you can take yourself out of the space of fear, number one.
Yes.
Self-consciousness, that's a huge one, right? People don't want to... Birth is an incredibly vulnerable experience, and if you can't feel vulnerable, or the people that you're with don't allow the space for you to have a real experience in front of them, it's going to be a lot more challenging.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. I know, we could talk for a really long
good
time.
Stuff. This is the good stuff. How are we doing? So, yes, so it's 11:02.
Okay.
If our listeners would like more information or resources on homeopathy, I know you have a very limited practice right now.
Yep.
If you would like to have your information out there, I'm happy to share it. We can talk about that after. But
Yeah.
if people are more interested in diving a little more deeply into homeopathy, what would you recommend?
So for some, like, really, I think probably some of the most user-friendly family care books that are out there are by Miranda Castro, Miranda, capital Castro.
Okay, we'll link it up too.
Exactly. Yep. And she's also got good remedy kits and things like that. I think she's really got very straightforward writings and instructions, right? My colleague, Rebecca Behringer at Healing Way Homeopathy, she's in the same building as I am, same suite. She offers classes. She'll oftentimes offer classes in building your home remedy kit and using it. Oftentimes, like, as flu season starts, she'll have a class on dealing with fevers and flu and things like that.
Amazing.
So really, really great. A lot of the time they're by Zoom, so you don't even have to, like, get yourself together and be there. Sometimes they're multiple weeks, and she's a phenomenal teacher, and her resource lists are great. Her handouts are amazing. And then you also have somebody who you already have contact with. So if you have a question where you need professional assistance, you've got an automatic person.
Yeah.
I am currently enrolled at a school called Prometheus Homeopathic Institute out of Stillwater, Minnesota. It's one of many homeopathy schools in the country, and it's one that really takes a very whole person approach toward the idea of homeopathy, using one remedy at a time. And that school does have a student clinic available for people. So if you're looking for low-cost homeopathic care, you can go to the school's website, and we'll put it in the bio or in the notes.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll put it in the notes. And sign up for homeopathic constitutional or acute care there. And you might get me if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Depending on what you think. All of those appointments are by Zoom.
Sure.
And starting in December, I'm actually going to be offering care in my office as well,
That's
under mentorship.
amazing.
So so we're starting our kind of clinical mentorship program. I do use it regularly in my practice. I do some light teaching for midwives. I've done some consultation for other midwives. I really like the idea of people figuring it out themselves. I like the idea of it being a very accessible and affordable and safe way of dealing with and supporting your health. So you can always contact me at my email address at Prometheus Homeopathic Institute, so I'll leave that there.
Perfect.
And if people are interested in scheduling or asking about doing constitutional care with me as a student practitioner, I'm happy to talk to them as well.
Yay. Yes.
Yeah.
She's great. You already know that because you've listened this far. So I'm sure that the people who are meant to find you will find you. Yeah.
The best part one of the best parts about it is that I actually don't get to talk very much I don't get to, have to, or need to talk very much when I'm doing an intake with somebody, because it's really about you.
It feels like
Right?
therapy. It feels like a therapy session to do a consult. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
Anne Marie, thank you so much for joining me here. It's been so great catching up and learning things that I didn't know about you, even though we've known each other for a long time. And it's an honor to be here with you. So thank you.
It's been so nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.